Hey guys, welcome back to another 2020, and you might be shocked by the fact that I'm doing the intro because I usurped the mic from Ben. And here we are back again for a second episode with the amazing Jason
Hey, I just got my coffee. What the fuck? Is she starting this shit without me?
That was a poor lie because we all know you don't drink coffee.
You're right.
You make coffee nervous.
We're letting women go first now? We're radical, aren't we?
You know, it's 2020. It's a crazy year.
Well, you know what?
Things are happening.
Can I say something about women going first?
Please don't.
Oh, no.
No, Siobhán.
We've just alienated
is
all our
number
female
one
listeners.
in the fucking world with the Queen's Gambit, which is on Netflix, which all of you guys in the entire world is probably watching. When you hear the violin, that's Siobhán. So you guys thought I was going to say something misogynistic or like down on women. I love women. In particular, I love the violin from the show I haven't heard yet because I haven't watched it because I don't have time.
Yeah, and as if Siobhán needed any other accomplishments to just, inflate her ego. She just can't stop gloating about it.
She didn't even know. Just so you guys know, I called her, and I had said to her the other night when she told me she was on a Netflix show and then barely internalized. I'm like, watch, they'll push that and say it's the number one show or like number 5 show. I call her, I'm like, you know you're number 1, right? And she's like, what do you mean?
I'm always number 1, Ben. I just don't talk about it.
Well, that's what Anne-Marie keeps telling me.
Yes, but if you want to be number 1, what you need to do is listen to this podcast with Jason Lekberg of Lekberg Enterprises for more absolutely invaluable marketing knowledge.
But here's the thing is, though, the truth is you probably can't afford Jason, so you're welcome. Just listen to what he has to say, record it, and then don't go to school. Just listen to him.
Go back and listen to his first episode if you want some more. I mean, there's always more content to be found.
What are you going to do? Fucking watch It 2 before It? Like, what's wrong
Exactly.
what's wrong with you? What's wrong with you? Go back and watch the first. Like, you can't jump in 3/4 of through like The Usual Suspect. Like, how are you going to fucking figure out who Kaiser Sose is?
So here you have it, part 2 with the illustrious Jason Lekberg.
Just like usual, we're waiting. Because time isn't of the essence when you're Siobhán Cronin and there's an owl flying by, or maybe someone from the Star Set, Alliance says, I need a picture with that dreamy looking hunk over there. So before I introduce anybody but myself, Benny Goodman, I'll introduce my friend here, Siobhán Cronin from Star Set, owl lover, hangs out at apiaries, lives in Miami just to sit by the water and watch birds. Siobhán Cronin. And then over there is Cory Peza. He's the guy that talks to Jason Lekberg and gets things done because I certainly don't. And then down wherever Cory decides to put him in the mix is the illustrious, the incredible, the all-knowing Jason Lekberg. He is our bridge to the singularity. He is your chance as a band of getting out of your mom's basement and possibly getting onto the Spotify. If you would like to be
the Spotify,
The Spotify.
If you want to be
Like
in
the Google.
space, just like Starset, you know what I
The
mean? He can
YouTube.
also get you on space, like a MySpace, maybe.
Sure.
Sure.
Latest
without
technology
without
only.
further ado, Jason, can you tell all the dullards out there, as Jason Costa agrees with me is a great word, all the plebeian guitar players, what are we doing wrong?
Guitar players, specifically.
Specifically guitar players.
all right, so I don't have to be
Other
a
than
part of
getting off
this.
stage fucking fast, because we've already established that. And if you guys didn't watch the previous podcast, 1, get the fuck on it, and 2, get the fuck off the
Get
stage.
off.
Established. But that's not just guitar players. That's
Lesson
everyone in
number
the
one.
That's my new saying in everyday life. Get the
Yeah.
fuck off
We
the
need
stage.
that needs to be another T-shirt idea. We need to keep a going
2020,
list of 2020
get the
T-shirts.
fuck off the stage. Thank you, Jason. Scott will
good.
pay for that. That will
All right,
actually be a
good.
thing.
Do it. Let's do it. No, what I would tell
It's
guitar
so,
players.
right? Well, hold on. Let's ask a
yeah.
real-time question. Do you think that if we actually had a 2020 shirt that just says 2020D,
Okay.
and then the back it says, get the
my
fuck
gosh.
off the stage with, like, the exclamation points, whatever, like, would that
I'd buy
sell? You'd buy
I'd buy it.
You really would buy
I would
it.
wear that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know what's
so
funny?
here's that.
Jason sends me to the Steel Panther site to be like, do you want a website like this? And then I spend $150. That's how good he is at marketing.
So yes, we want a website just like that then.
I mean, here's the good. Well, you got one. The good news is that everything that we make is print on demand. So we can all we need is the art. We don't even have to spend any money, and we can put up the "Get the fuck off the stage" shirt.
Well, but for that amount of money and for how little we're doing, like so in Lost Symphony, which is our sponsor, Lost Symphony, lostsymphony.com, chapter 1, chapter 2 is coming out. We're about to announce it. By the time you hear this, it's probably already out because we got a lot in the canon. So who knows when you're seeing this bullshit where you are, but thank you for being here.
Yes.
But we're here with Jason because we just need to figure out, like, what can we do during these times right now for people to pay attention to us amongst all the fucking noise?
Do you realize you just asked him a question that you then didn't let him answer, and now asked him another question?
Questions because I'm high. I'm sorry.
You know what
Answer whichever one you want.
You know what guitar players can do? They can not hijack questions.
Yes.
See, I gave him my own Carl Reiner to my Mel Brooks.
I'll dive in. The second one is the tougher one. The first one's way easier to answer, but the second one, man, the internet has been a amazing democratizing force, and it has allowed everybody to have a voice, which is fantastic. But it also means that everybody has a voice.
Siobhán?
Yes, I agree with the second part. He said everyone has a voice.
But Jason, now I am not a marketing person. I don't claim to be. But shouldn't you play to your audience? Because democratize, that's like polysyllabic. Why are you not playing to the audience? Do you not know who listens to this? Other than my mom who was valedictorian?
I do, because I know who's playing on the record, and they're a bunch of smart people.
Saved it.
I mean, look, if you're buying the Lost Symphony album, you are definitely a smart person, and I'm going to bet you know multiple 5-syllable words.
Wicked smart.
You're wicked smart. I mean, I think that the biggest problem is that once everybody has a voice, everybody has a voice. And then you're now trying to figure out how to cut through the white noise. When Dan Beck, tying it back around, when Dan Beck was marketing, it was, you get it on radio, you get it on TV.
That aren't up to speed, Dan Beck is a music fucking legend. I've called him the Oracle. I've referred to him as the Brontosaurus, not in a derogatory way, but because he's from another time, another place before the music industry exploded. He can understand the metaphor. He's probably going, all right, Ben, it's crude, but I get it. Like, we'll let it pass. But Jason is now the transcendent man that has walked past the Brontosaurus, taken the Oracle-like knowledge that he's passed on to him, and then formed Captain Planet in the form of Lekberg Enterprises, which is why we're speaking to him today. Because, again, I don't know what to do, and where Dan Beck would normally know what to do, it's not the 80s.
To be fair, I would say that if that is the analogy that we're going with, I absolutely keep the Brontosaurus very, very close, and I welcome the knowledge and the wisdom that it brings me, and I look forward to being able to learn from the Brontosaurus what the next flaming meteor looks like, so that I can avoid it.
That's a good one, yeah.
Great.
So, I mean, I think that
Well, thank God that Brontosaurus in particular survived the flaming meteor.
Right.
Yes.
Right. I mean, look, it's tough to cut through the noise. I think, touching on something that we kind of talked about in the last cast, one of the biggest things is to have a clear marketing and a clear brand and a clear vision. When I, again, touching on what we talk about, when I saw that picture of Starset, I knew exactly what Starset was. And so if you've got 1 second to have someone on social media who's scrolling see something, you need them to immediately understand. That's the fastest way to cut through the noise. And then I think it's important to also speak to your audience, because you want imagery and you want video and you want things like that speak to the people that you want to listen to you. If I famously worked with a band who I won't name, who were a very, very heavy band, and at a certain point in their career decided to all put on cowboy hats. And one of them had worn cowboy hats his whole career, so that was just kind of part of who he was. It's from the South. It's totally acceptable. And it's totally acceptable to wear a cowboy hat in general. I mean, there's a lot of people in heavy music that wear cowboy hats, and that's kind of that brand Worn Star from Chicago, like that's half of what they sell, or like crumpled up cowboy hats. So that's kind of like, that's fine. But the problem was the audience said, what happened? Who am I talking to now?
Right.
And so when the brand message sometimes gets confused like that, I mean, we did a lot of work to try and like help people understand that, but now we have a brand message that doesn't necessarily match what it is. And I even suffered from that in my last band. My last band was called I Kill Ya with an A at the end, and it was all one word. And I heard from several people later on, like, oh, well, I never listened to your band. I thought you were a nu metal band because it was misspelled and there was a ya in it. Right. And it's like, oh, well, metal. I messed it up, like, so things like that are very important when you're thinking about that, how to cut through the clutter, you've got to be people got to get it immediately.
So basically what I've learned from this is that Brock shouldn't have a face.
Why?
Well, because he's got a helmet. So in the most iconic image of Starset that Jason now knows you guys, all you're telling Dustin, and you're reaffirming through operant conditioning, is that the people should be faceless, because it really is just about the big collective, which is Dustin's vision.
But if I remember that image correctly, like the helmets they're wearing are like fully glass, so you can still see them. You can see them. They're just
It's a little less clear. Well, it's not as clear as Dustin out of the mask, but their faces aren't.
Which one's the dreamy one, Siobhán?
Brock's always the dreamy one.
Can you tell which one is him?
Depends on your taste.
I'm saying,
everyone might take a different dream.
If you're going through Facebook really quickly, you can go, that's Brock.
Yeah, I mean, he's right. They're not totally hidden. You can see. I mean, it's a little bit cloudy, but
that's
yeah. It's not Ghost. Yeah.
Totally.
So we've kind of established your main pet peeves as far as the marketing goes, and also like the the ground floor of coming up with that image and branding. But this industry is kind of ever evolving, and what do you do, and what can people do to stay on the bleeding edge of that? Is there a resource that you look to, or is it just a holistic?
Can we reiterate what bleeding edge means? Because I really like this term, because I actually had written it down because it's actually part of your bio, and it's like I don't even know what bleeding edge means. I mean, it sounds metal. Like, I mean, I dude, we need this guy because he said he's on the bleeding edge, and I feel like bleeding edge sounds like something that Death would do, and Schuldner is the fucking man.
Right. So the cutting edge.
I trust him.
So the cutting edge refers generally to like the sharpest point of the knife. The bleeding edge would actually be the action that the knife is making, that where it's actually cutting. So you're technically not ahead of the knife, but you're actualizing the cutting edge. So you're actually making use out of it.
The cutting. You are the you're like a verb. You're cutting. Yeah. You're actually the one doing the cutting, but you're the cutting.
Right, because it's one thing to understand and know what is happening or have an idea of what's happening. It's another thing to do it. So I look at the bleeding edges. Like getting 2020. Exactly. Yeah. So that's what I think of as the bleeding edge. And as far as what people can do to stay on the bleeding edge, it's education. I mean, I use this site I use is called Feedly, and it basically just lets you pull in all these different blogs. And it gives you just headlines of everything that's in the blogs. And every day at lunch, I just sit in front of my computer and eat lunch. And I have a tab that's all the metal sites. And then I have a tab that's all cryptocurrency, because I'm a cryptocurrency nut. And then I have a tab that's all tech. So I've got TechCrunch and Mashable and all those.
I said
this. You know all the trends right away. Yeah, go ahead.
I think he really is the lawnmower man. Like, I bet you he sits in front of that and he's just like, I know French now. It's like the Matrix. Like,
you're really great at absorbing information really fast.
My dad is crazy, right? But he sits in front of 18 computer screens, and he can somehow absorb 73 number, because he's an option trader. So if you know anything about options, which I certainly don't know, but it's like doing logarithms upon logarithms / the bubonic plague mixed with pneumona ultra microscopic so-called volcanoconiosis. You know what I mean? So I don't know. I have no fucking idea. So whatever you're talking about, I just have total respect for you, Jason, because it makes no sense to me. And what I said to Cory and to Siobhán when I said, I wanted you on, was just I want you to demystify what's really happening, because I feel like this is the Wizard of Oz, and you having your own band and you doing so when I said you're the hardest working guy in the industry, it's because first off, you work with some of the biggest people, which I've waited for you to name drop, but like whatever, like people can go online and I won't blow up your spot. But he's worked with some like super fucking awesome bands, some of which may be on my wall. You know what I mean? But you also, do the clubs in New York, and you have a few hundred people at your shows, and you are in the trenches of war, dude. And just like you said, you painted houses, you're covered in tattoos, you are the real deal, and like you risked total, not making it. You know what I mean? Like wasting all that money for 3 months to find out, like, is this your path? And you're doing it. But like when you're a guitar player, you sit there in a room, you go, okay, I just wrote what I think to be the next vulgar display of power. What do I do now, man?
Yeah. It's get it in front of people in every possible way that you can. That's the most important thing. I mean, people have to hear it. And, there's a marketing adage that I love, which is that the average person needs to interact with your brand 7 times before they take action. And that's obviously the average. So some people it takes more. So if you think of that as a band, your band is a brand, right?
Do you know why they say 7, by the way?
Why is that?
Because that's the original number. Why you have 7 numbers in a phone number originally is because that's what the human brain can average, like remember 7 numbers consecutively. So that's why that must be, because it's the people could have absorbed 7 things. Technically, they say you should only study 3 things at once, but 7 separate things in succession a human brain can absorb on average, unless you're Jason Lekberg and you're watching 75 screens with Bitcoin over here and then Lamb of God over there playing fucking like Frank Zappa in the back just to be cultured.
Yeah.
Well, the point is it could be more though. I mean, some people might need more than that. Yeah, you're right.
When I was a kid, somebody told me one time that the human mind could think of, it was somewhere around there, like 6 or 7 things at the same time. And I remember sitting in high school in a class that I hated, trying to have 7 songs going at the same time in my brain,
God.
And like it didn't.
I can tell you what happens every single time I try to do that. Boobs. Boobs. That's what happens. I'm trying to think of like what should I do next, and it's just like boobs. And that's why I haven't done. That's why I don't have a PhD. That's why Siobhán has 2 master's degrees. Like she thinks she's actually that much better than me. Well, yeah. Honestly, if I wasn't thinking about boobs, I'm pretty sure that I would have 2 master's degrees by now. Just saying.
Maybe.
There may be some validity to that. That's an interesting argument.
I mean, I wouldn't want to find out. Because, I think boobs are spectacular. I mean, just as a job.
But also master's degrees haven't necessarily made me more intelligent. So
they're great
don't worry too much.
Speaking of all these things you have going on between the band and Lekberg Enterprise and just, I hope, having some kind of social life at some point, like how do you handle time management and without going crazy?
I'm actually very bad with time management. Well, no, let me say this. I feel like I manage my time well, but to someone else who's very interested in things like, I don't know, like sitting on a lawn, I'm bad with time management because I just don't like, I get
stressed out about his having free time, Cory. You should relate to him on this because
we talk about this like every episode.
Cory hates free time because it stresses him out. I feel like you were saying on the previous
it's not free time. Not free time. I wish I had free time. Relaxing is the most stressful thing I can do.
The only way I can actually relax is I have to leave the country and be in a place where I know that it will cost me so much money to use my cell phone that I actively just go, you know what? It's not responsible to use my cell phone because it'll be too expensive. So I need to put it down. That's the only way I can relax. I'll be sitting on my couch and, I sit there for more than an hour, like on the weekends, and I start freaking out and I'm like, what do I do?
He's like, it's like when you're chilling, like smoking your joint, like thinking everything's fine. Jason's like, I'm freaking out. That's what he's doing. That's why
it's like the creative energy, you always have to be making.
But that's what I respect about him so much because like literally Cory and I spent all this time and Siobhán, you as well, Brian, all the people that were on this record, we spent so much time and we never thought, but how are we going to do anything with this? And when Jason came in, it was just like, well, what's your plan? And we're like,
I didn't think anyone was going to listen to it. I thought this was just, to play nerdy music.
Like the first thing he said, it was like, where's the metadata or something like that. I'm like, metadata? Metallica? I love Metallica. Like I do. The Black Album is still a great record.
Yeah, it was a good record.
Oh my God.
It took me years to appreciate it, but it was a good record.
One of those guys.
No, but
No,
I am
actually. Oh,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No,
go ahead, Corey.
go
Don't worry
on. We
about
can
it.
continue
No,
on that.
we want to
That's
hear
good.
about your Metallica.
We
My
want
Metallica
you
story.
to talk.
I'll tell you my Metallica story. So my father was a pastor. So I went to private school and didn't get exposed to secular music until much later. And I remember I saw the Enter Sandman music video premiere on MTV at my buddy's house. And it melted my frickin' brain. And I was like, this is the heaviest thing that has ever existed. This is the coolest thing ever. And my buddy, I swear to God this happened. He said, I don't know. It's a little bit lighter than their early stuff. And I bet him $10 that it was not possible to be heavier than what I had just experienced. And he took me upstairs to his bedroom and played one. And I was like that was that was one of the moments of my life. It completely changed the trajectory of my life.
You know what's
That's
really
crazy.
metal about
Wow.
that time for Metallica? That's first off an awesome, great story. And I have a Metallica poster in the back where I have a
see it.
Jim Henson Metallica thing. But you know what's really metal about that time? Not shortly after the premiere of that. I don't know if you remember this, but there was a Metallica contest where they would come to you and they were going to play. And shortly before that, Kirk Hammett had emergency surgery because his appendix burst. And he shows up to the guy's house at MTV with his appendix in formaldehyde and actually not only played Metallica, but gave him the winner of this contest on MTV his appendix. I said, that's fucking metal. I wasn't very, I don't know what this is, but this is fucking craziness.
Like, no,
that's
no
a true
thank you.
story.
Can you just play a song, please?
Well, yeah, I know. Can you imagine that now? Like, Kirk Hammett just gives his appendix. It's probably on eBay right now. We're just driving the price up.
That's amazing.
That's a true story.
I never heard that story.
That's
That's amazing. That's amazing. Wow.
he gave
I
it
want
away
somebody
on
to-
MTV.
I want somebody
Fuck
to
it.
do it. I'm a huge documentary guy, so I want somebody to do a documentary about that guy and where the appendix is. So that's what I want to know. I want to know that. I want to know how that guy weathered the
Hold
late
on,
90s
I'm finding
with
out
Metallica.
that was also Marcy's Playground.
Sorry, wrong band. Wrong band.
I'm kidding. It was Metallica.
But how fascinating would that be to be like, okay, you're the guy that's got Kirk Hammett's appendix. You are now clearly like the biggest Metallica fan on the planet. You had this crazy experience happen to you, right? And then they put out Load, and then they put out Reload, and then Saint Anger comes out, and like what happens to you? Like, I want to know that guy's story. I want to know how he dealt with the late 90s Metallica and where he is now. And
Kip Winger will tell you himself. We're going to have him on the show.
that would be amazing. Oh, wait, are you seriously going to have Kip Winger on?
No, I'm saying if
my
that
God.
was Kip Winger that you were talking about.
Oh, well, if you're going to have Kip Winger.
I would love to have Kip Winger. Oh my God. Like, so everyone shits on Winger. We were talking about bands
Winger's
that are
amazing.
like, unfairly shit on, like Nickelback, who's not a bad band at all. Winger, because of Beavis and Butthead in particular, which is where I saw one for the first time and shit my pants, like everybody that should ever have heard one. Like, because that was actually my first experience. It was during the Metallica Enter Sandman time, but that was with Beavis and Butthead. I remember staying up at my friend's house. My parents didn't let me watch Beavis and Butthead because they thought I was infantile. And it certainly is, and that's why it's fucking genius. And they sat in front of the TV, and they're like, this is awesome. That's fucking cool. And it is, because when they go into the double bass thing, like, that changed my life. Like, I can only imagine the story where you say you heard Enter Sandman, and you're like, how do you get better than this? And they walk upstairs, you're like, oh, really? And then you hear... And like, literally, here's the thing about Metallica. You can literally just go and 50,000 people in Brazil will do the same thing with you.
Well, that's because the cadence with which we did that with our mouths is pretty close to how Lars plays the double bass. So it actually sounds like Metallica.
Equally accurate.
I had to get a shot in there. Sorry.
It's okay. I saw them live a couple of years ago, and I was like, all right, the image that I have has been ruined, so I'm just going to go back and listen to my records. And
Oh my gosh.
yeah.
We could do a whole cast about Metallica.
But here's the thing, though. Doesn't it make James Hetfield better to you? Because the fact that he could still play and make it look like he's playing perfectly in time, with Lars literally just sand fucking him. Just literally like curb stomping the rhythm in the middle of the song. He's like, Harvester of Sorrow, fuck it, we're going to skip a whole section. And James' right hand, it never stops fucking playing.
That's the way I felt But see, I have this, again, I could spend an entire hour talking just about this. I have a crazy relationship with Metallica, and my history with Metallica goes really deep. But crazy stories with me and Metallica. So, but having nothing to do with them. They're not aware of this at all. This is like my own insanity shit. But
the free ends of sanity, according to Jason Lekberg.
Exactly. So basically, seeing that forever, I was like, oh, James is the man. He's got the right hand. And I was like, that's the saving grace. I love James. James is my guy. I didn't watch Some Kind of Monster when it came out because I, at that time, was very, very angry at Metallica, like really angry at Metallica. And actually, some of the first press that I ever got was related to how angry I was at Metallica. So I didn't watch it. I waited 15 years before I watched Some Kind of Monster. And in that time, I had a good chunk of my music career. And so I literally, just a couple years ago, I went back and watched Some Kind of Monster for the first time. And I'm really glad I waited, because what I understand about the way the music industry works, absolutely, I know I saw that movie differently than anyone who doesn't understand the back end side. But I walked away from that going, Lars is my dude. Lars is the only sane guy in that band. James just taken off for a year and a half and being like, oh, I'm just not going to come to practice or call you, and holding the band hostage. Like, holy shit, I would have lost my mind. If I was Lars, I would have hunted him down and found him and yeah. So anyways, I used to like James, but Lars is my dude now.
You know what? And then you go and see Megadeth and realize that they actually play in time, and that Dave Mustaine actually can play, I'm going to say it, I think equally, if not better than Kirk Hammett.
Well, I mean, you know what? I think what helps is that when you make a career,
thing. It's like finding out your dad isn't the smartest person in the world. You all, like back in the day, if you asked me when I was 16, Metallica or Megadeth, Metallica, you're fucking stupid otherwise. Metallica for Master of Puppets, Metallica for Ride the Lightning, Metallica for One, Metallica for the fact that they chose to not put a bass player on it and it still fucking kicks ass, for Blackened, for the Frayed Ends of Sanity, for every reason. And now, as an adult, I realized I love Megadeth. And
I'll say this for Dave Mustaine.
Superior.
He sounds shockingly similar to how he sounded back in the day, primarily because he started his career sounding like a crotchety old man. So once he became a crotchety old man, he just sounds the same. Right. So that's what I'll give Dave Mustaine.
Listen, man, I've met Dave Mustaine like 10 times, and like one time he was cool. And like my friend who knows, Ernie and Alex. Yeah. So they're like, oh yeah, he's so nice. And I'm like, you guys are rich. Of course he's nice to you. Like, and I don't mean to be like bougie or elitist, but like, he said, your Rolls Royce is the most metal car ever. Yeah, your all blacked out $1 million Rolls Royce is fucking metal. That said, when I went with Ernie Bach and his son to go meet Dave Mustaine backstage at the Jimi Hendrix thing, like Johnny Lang walks in, hey man, how are you? Blah, blah, blah. Like Buddy Cox, who played with Hendrix, walks in. Like Dave Mustaine goes and talks to Ernie. He's like 6'17", and Ernie's like 7'13", and they're talking face to face, and I'm staying there for so long that finally Dave Mustaine looks at me and goes, "Why are you standing here?"
Oh my God.
And I said, "Well, I'm with them." He goes, "Oh, that would have been weird." And I said, "Hey man, will you sign this?" And he goes, "Are you trying to get everyone's autograph?" I'm like, "Yeah." He's like, "Good for you." I'm like, how do you think this guy's nice? And then he goes and smokes a bunch of weed in his fucking bus, comes back a little blasted, and he sees that I've like got Kenny Aronoff's signature, who's fucking awesome. And he's like, "I see you're doing well on that."
That's kind of a good story.
I'm like, "Yeah, dude." I'm like, "I am." He's like, "Good for you." And then he like kind of looked like earnest for a moment, like, "I'm now going to go on stage and play Jimi Hendrix because I'm Dave Mustaine," and just kind of like, phew.
He was always a man of the people, and I'm serious. In 2000 and probably 1 or 2, I was in a band, and me and the guitar player stood outside behind the Megadeth show and waited for him to walk out to his bus at like 3 a.m, and we gave him our press kit. And my guitar player also at the time said, "Hey, you're my dad," which was really funny. That's how he introduced himself. He was like, "Oh, hey, Dave Mustaine, you're my dad." And Dave goes, "How old are you?" And my buddy tells him, and Dave goes, "Not possible." And I was like, "Okay, cool. Well, here's our press kit if you want to check out our band." And he actually reviewed my band on Megadeth.com. He listened to it and wrote a review of the band.
He's like, they made a joke, so I'm going to take the joke further and put it on my website.
You talked about before how to kind of step above the noise, and that's what a great method to like just set yourself apart is just shock and awe. I'm sure a million people have ran up to him. "Hey, will you listen to my CD?" And
I actually am going to tell you the opportune Dave Mustaine story, because the first time I met Dave Mustaine was when they were about to shoot the video for Crush 'Em. My buddy had done the show Loco Bazooka, and he was working for WAF and did their shows, and he got Megadeth and Power Man 5000 and whatever, and he got me a pass, and he said, "I want you to take care of Megadeth, but don't ask for their autographs. People who ask for autographs are lame. You're better than that." And like, I asked for autographs. Like, look at me. Look. Like, so I walked in the back and I see Megadeth, and it's funny because they actually had this tour manager, Steve Wood at the time, who's now my friend, who I know now, but he was there. He was their tour manager at the time, and he remembers this story because I was so obnoxious. I walked in the back and you had Dave Mustaine and Marty Friedman and Jimmy DeGrasso was the drummer du jour at the moment, and David Elfson, and they were practicing Crush 'Em. And I walked back like, "Hey guys, I'm the guy that's supposed to take care of you." And Dave Mustaine just looks at Steve Wood, he goes, "Out, just get fucking out." Ow! And like I'm like 16, and I was like so upset. And like later he comes up to me, he's like, I didn't mean to yell at you, kid." And meanwhile, there's another kid who's wearing a Metallica shirt inside out because like someone told him not to wear it. I heard them say, he's like 16, and he goes, "I know what that is." As he comes back up to me, I swear to God, this is totally true. And he's like, "Do you want to come down and play my new guitar?" "Yes, Mr. Mustaine. I'll even sign your pass for you." "Really?" And I go over and he like has me play his guitar for like 2 minutes, and then he's like, "That's enough! Out!
Oh my God.
Out!" And then they shot the Crush 'Em video. And Steve Wood, who now works with Paul Geary, you know Steve Wood. I
know Steve Wood well.
Was like, "I remember that," in his accent. He's like, I remember that. That was you? I'm like, "Nothing's changed."
Well,
nothing has changed. I was going to say, especially for you, because you still run backstage and people are just like, "What the hell's going on here?"
Oh, yeah. That's actually how Jason met me, because we were backstage at Steel Panther, and I remember, because Scott was like, "Do you know Jason?" I'm like, "I'm not sure." And then when I met him again at Steel Panther, I'm like remembering I was up, and I was during the obnoxious time when they're trying to rile the band up to go on stage, and they're supposed to get people back there, but I'm like, I'm special. I'm special. I'm friends with the band. They like me. And Jason was the guy that was like, "Dude, you're not special, and you should get the fuck out of here." And like, I was like, but it's me. And he's like, "I don't know who the fuck you out." And I remember that like Scott's like, "How do you know this guy?" I'm like, he understood my game and totally like AMOG'd me.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah, you're just used to doing it to people. You break everyone's heart, so you forget about it. But I remember.
Yeah, that would be me. Yes.
Oh my gosh.
I remember talking to you afterwards.
Oh, no, go ahead.
No,
Sorry.
that was the second show. This was a previous show at the House of Blues in Boston. We met in Connecticut, so I knew who you were from the PTSD, and you just knew who I was from Scott. So you're like, oh, so you were like pleasantly passive aggressive, whereas like I was like, I don't know why, but I feel like this guy hates me for some reason. And I vaguely remember you yelling at me, but then I didn't put two and two to like, I think you yelled at me on the phone for doing something stupid as guitar players always do. And I was like, oh, I remember that guy. He told me to get out of the backstage area because I was being obnoxious.
Well, anyway, to reel it back in, I was thinking, so Jason, you know, not to change the subject totally, but you obviously have a lot of insight, on the things that people should be doing. And I'm just curious, do you have any examples of moments or stories that were like a learning process for you where you like kind of figured out like what's the better way of doing something? Because I feel like you had to have learned some of this through experience. You know, it's not like you go to school for these things necessarily.
Yeah, I learned a lot of things in practice, and I have made my very large fair share of mistakes. There's no question about that. It's tough again, and I'm sorry, Benny, that I'm not name dropping as much as you would like, but one of the largest artists that I ever worked with at Epic, kind of was my demise at Epic because understanding lanes. It's one of the biggest things I had to learn was what lane I needed to be in, and I didn't understand what game was being played, and I think I was trying to be everybody's friend. And I was trying to work, we're all going to work together and we're doing things great. And that's not the game that everybody else was playing.
You know what my grandfather used to say, Jason?
What's that?
The foreman eats alone.
That's a good saying. That's a good saying. Yeah. At that time, I was trying to be the middleman and the peacekeeper and make everybody work together, and I think I got a little too friendly with management for the artists. And I was trying to kind of like, well, we can all do this. And what I didn't understand at the time was that management's goal was get as much money and as much marketing as I possibly can out of this label because they're trying to screw us anyway. And the label's intention was spend as little as possible and get this record off our plate. And those two things obviously don't go together well. And this artist was up for a Walmart promotion sponsored by Dove, the women's or ladies, I guess I should say, feminine hygiene products. This was a metal artist. Surprisingly, Dove didn't feel that they were a good
Dove
fit.
soap is actually divine.
Right.
They could totally be a sponsor because I actually love how it makes my skin feel.
So yeah,
I mean, it's very nice.
If you still have that connection, let them know Lost Symphony.
Yeah. Unfortunately, they didn't feel that this artist was a good fit for their program. And when I had to deliver the news, the manager, the manager forwarded that to the chairman of Epic and Columbia in North America and said, "Why is your company not delivering for my artist?" And that email was obviously forwarded directly to my boss, and my boss was like, "What the hell is your problem?" And I was like, I don't know. I think I thought I was telling the truth. It just didn't work out. And basically, everything was like, you're not playing the game. It wasn't necessarily that anyone was telling me to lie. They weren't telling me not to lie, but they were basically saying like, you're too much in the middle and you don't understand what the people's objectives are and what they're after. And I thought we were all just one big happy metal family.
So is it like when Jack Nicholson throws down, he's like, I'll piss in your dead skull, soldier.
I mean, that was kind of what my boss said. Yeah. I had a meeting with the GM of the label right after that. And I said to him, look, our managers understand the situation that the record industry is in right now. We can go to them and say, we can all work together and we have these budgets and let's make them work together. And he looked at me and he goes, I think you're too idealistic to work for Epic Records. And I said, oh, I think you're right.
That explains so much.
That's heavy.
How long after that did you found your own company? Was that?
At that time, I was already kind of thinking about it. I wanted to. I had kind of already had the idea because when I was at Epic was when Radiohead put out In Rainbows and Nine Inch Nails put out. I don't remember the name. They put out a record at that same time, and both of them did it without a label and basically just posted them on their MySpace pages. And I watched that and I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But they sold like a fraction of the records and nobody knew that they were out.
Those were both of those bands' best records, clearly.
Well,
regardless of whether Rainbows is literally what I used to do when I painted houses. And then, think about it, like that Nine Inch Nails. Like, I love Nine Inch Nails, but there was like 5 records, bless you, that he left on jump drives in some discotheque in Europe or whatever at that time. And the reason he did that is because they suck.
I mean, regardless of whether or not they sucked, what it said to me was artists know how to make records. Artists don't understand how to do everything else that goes along with it, but there's a business here. This is where the future is going. Artists owning their rights, owning their IP, and releasing it on their own, taking full control of their careers, but they're going to need somebody to help facilitate that. So that spurred me to go, this is the business I need to make. And so I started putting that plan together at that time. But it took me when everything kind of went down at Epic, I realized at that point I didn't feel like I knew enough. I didn't feel like I was ready to do that. And here, Benny, I'll name drop a little bit for you. At that time, I was product manager for Hell Yeah and Mudvayne. And Hell Yeah had just signed with Alan Kovac for management. And Chad Gray heard that I was getting blown out. I kind of was like, this is the end for me. I know it's coming. And Chad picked up the phone and called Alan Kovac and said, I need you to take lunch with my guy. And so I went and had lunch with Alan Kovac and left, and he offered me a job that afternoon. And
Nice.
I went to work for 11/7 and spent a couple of years at 11/7 building their digital department and being a product manager there. And that kind of gave me the experience on the indie side also to get to a place where I felt like I'm ready to do this. So it was a couple more years.
That's interesting. I was going to ask, how do you know, like, for anyone that's thinking about going out on their own, whether it's in music or any other sort of business, like, how do you know when you're ready? Because I feel like you could also end up never feeling ready. You know what I mean? What made you know?
I don't think that I had kind of set a goal for myself. So I had said I wanted to, the beginning of 2014, after the holidays in 2013, I wanted to resign and launch my business. That was kind of like my goal. And I was working towards that. And I, arguably had a couple of things not happened. I don't know if I would have made that goal. I definitely wanted to, and I really was passionate about it. I would like to think that I would have, but about September of 2013, I got a call from a friend of mine who was running digital for Paul Geary, who we've talked about a few times. And she said, hey, do you know anybody who would want to be an independent product manager for Steel Panther? And I said, well, actually, and so I went to LA
fun?
Yeah, it still is fun.
Yeah.
And I went to LA to do an Escape the Fate video shoot and just took an afternoon and went to Paul Geary's office and sat down and said, this is what I do. This is what I'm going to do. And
what's that guy like? Is he
Paul?
a peach?
Paul's fun. I like working with Paul. Paul was really fascinating for me because one of the first bands that I discovered prior to Metallica, when I discovered like rock and roll, was Bon Jovi. And one of the first tours I ever saw was Bon Jovi in Extreme. And I worked it out. It was like in 2013. It was 2013. 2013, I was in his office 20 years from the day that I had seen him open for Bon Jovi. And that was like, this
crazy.
cool, like, whoa.
That's so weird that you say that because I have a very similar story because I actually had met him when he was signing Reveille. And like way when he first started, and I was backstage one year at Ozfest '99. I still have the guitar over there, and he had just started signing Godsmack, or like was working with Godsmack, and I asked him if he would sign my guitar, and he pushes Sully at me, and I said, "No, aren't you Paul Geary?" And he goes, "How old are you, kid?" And even to this day, he's like, "Oh, that sounds like me." I'm like, and I had to prove to him, like, I love Extreme. I'm like, no, I love Extreme, man. Like, you're awesome. And I still have actually a signed guitar from Paul Geary, and he's like the nicest guy in the entire world. And there's a reason why he's like management Jedi, is because he's like. The thing I like about Paul is that it doesn't matter if you're a guy or a girl. He makes you feel like you're the only person in the world. He talks to you and he just makes you feel so good. It's like, he's like, Ben, you're looking healthy. Like, are your teeth whiter? Like, your band's doing good, huh? Like, just everything he says, it's just like, oh, I don't know if he means it or not, but it just sounds and feels so good. But then you think he doesn't mean it, but he does. And then like even 30 years later, he's got like guys that are like, oh, Paul's never fucked me over. He's great. Because he's like the nice guy for everybody. So it was when we called Paul, because he is also a fellow Oracle that'll go, hey buddy, that's not gonna work, dude. Like, I want to do that. We're like, well, Paul, we don't know anybody that knows how to do any of this stuff other than you. And he's like, well, you can't afford me. I'm like, well, clearly. So then he's like, well, but is there anyone else? It's like, well, and then immediately he's like, I have a guy. And then there's Jason. So like you clearly, whether it's Chad Gray or Paul Geary, let me tell you, Paul doesn't recommend people easily. He doesn't even choose a coffee. Like he's very particular. And he was just like, no, I have a guy. There's no question he's the right guy for you. Like when he talked to Scott, who's our sponsor, He was like, you got to hire Jason. He will help all your problems. Stop calling me, pretty much.
I mean, I'm honored by that, and that means a lot. You know, that really is. That's an amazing thing. It's an amazing thing for me to hear, to think back about watching him play drums, being a 14-year-old, and like losing my mind watching him and Bon Jovi on stage. You know, that for him to have said something like that about me is, you know, I feel very fortunate.
He's like, I don't remember any of that. He's like, Benny, you're just making shit up.
No,
I'm kidding. He totally was like that. He. Anyone that doesn't know Paul is the nicest guy in the world, and he absolutely did say great things to you, because if he didn't, Scott wouldn't have spent the money, because he's cheap.
Scott is far from cheap. I have worked with cheap. He is not cheap.
I'm kidding. Yeah. I love Scott. He knows I can say that because he's going to later
incredibly generous.
Well, you owe me. You owe me for saying that on the radio, but I'll let it slide because it was kind of funny.
Yeah, but you know, to answer your question, Siobhán, I mean, that was really what kind of you know, him saying, let's do this, that was the spark. So I resigned a couple months early and was like, okay, I have a client now, and now I have a business. And I just called everybody I knew and said, hey, I have my shingles out. You need some help? Let's do this.
Yeah.
You know?
Wow. Good for you. That's incredible.
Thanks. You know, it's been tough because, you know, the model that I kind of talked about, or that I've talked about, you know, wanting to really empower artists to fully take control of their careers, is something that's taken a long time for the music industry to understand. I'm just going to be blunt about it, really, to understand what the business model is. And it took, I mean, I've been working with Steel Panther now for 7 years, and it took 5.5, 6 of those years before I started to have people go, okay, what are they doing? Like, that's working. Why is that working? And I had lots of campaigns that I ran
all
between.
The boobs?
It was not the boobs. It's not the boobs, believe it or not. Boobs are really hard to wrangle. They're very hard to wrangle.
Anyone in Steel Panther will tell you that. It's absolutely true. Corey and I have witnessed many a time.
So difficult.
It's very difficult. But when it happens, it's a very synergistic thing when they're able to do what they do.
It's a weird experience. It is definitely one of those things where you kind of go, I understand why this works. I don't know if I'm 100% comfortable with what's happening right now.
I'm never comfortable.
But she's 100%. Is she okay? Is she okay? Let's just go with this. Like,
nobody went and watched Gigi Allen to feel comfortable, Jason, and he was still punk.
It's a weird experience, but anyways, it took years for people to look at that success, and I did a lot of campaigns for artists who I love, who didn't fully get it, that just thought, oh, we're going to hire you just to make sure our record's in stores. And once it's in stores, after a month, we're going to be like, thanks a lot, see you later. And there's so much more that this business is about that Panther has understood from the beginning.
Yeah, it's like a long game. A lot of people probably exit too early, you know, or impatient or something.
They're not owning enough of their
nobody
IP.
Wants to pay for
That's
it.
the biggest thing.
The thing that people don't realize now, to be completely transparent, is that everything a record label used to be able to afford you can now just buy yourself. You can. And that what you're doing is basically what a record label in the times of olden days with other oracles would have done, except that you're a private guy. You're going into you're an infantry guy that's called in because you're the professional.
I mean, you know, it's more than just the record label, because it's about a complete paradigm shift in the way that the industry is structured. The industry structure used to be that the artist made the music. They technically sold the music to the record label. So they would sell their rights to the record label for an advance and potential future profit, potentially. And then the record label would mass produce the record and sell it to a store in bulk. So when Guns N' Roses' Chinese Democracy came out, it shipped gold because Best Buy ordered 500,000 copies week one.
I remember that.
Right? That's an incredible thing. But that is a completely different paradigm from where we are now, because at that point, it's Best Buy's responsibility to sell to the customer.
Yeah,
right.
But that's also huge. That was a huge letdown for Best Buy because even though that record it sold, but I have it on my wall. It's like 2008 November something, and it said the most anticipated record of all time. Well, the most anticipated record of all time, I think, sold like 1.5 or 2 million copies when Best Buy had 500,000 shipped to stores already, like it was going to be Pearl Jam versus.
But I think that the biggest issue that the paradigm shift is that at that point, we were still relying on the store to sell to the consumer. And when there is a step or a group of people or an entire business between the artist and the consumer, you have no control over your career. Your career is then decided by the people in that office who are going to replicate that record and who are going to market that record, and then by the people who are buying and selling that between the two businesses. As soon as you remove those people, which is the amazing thing the internet has allowed us to do, it's allowed us to sell directly to the fan. Now we're in the same business that that any other major brand is. They're talking about average customer value. They're talking about lifetime value. They're looking at a customer and saying, okay, this person bought one album, that's great. But if they'll buy an album, will they buy a shirt? And if they'll buy an album and a shirt, will they buy an album and a shirt and a ticket?
One thing to the listeners, if you're in account and financing, this is where you take notes, because you go, hey man, I'll never use this shit ever. This is literally called COGS, ROI, all those corporate speak things. So you say to yourself, like I say to myself, like I can barely even write. Like, you know what I mean? Like I sign my name like this because I don't even know cursive because they don't teach it anymore.
That's a whole other problem.
But the thing I'm telling people is that like I almost want to take notes to what you're saying is because you are giving the answers to our listeners, and there's still going to be some guitar player going, dude, but I think I should be louder. And he's gonna like, my guy gets me off stage in at least 30 minutes. We'll be fine.
But this is a perspective that most people don't consider. So this is huge.
Well, that's why I'm saying take your fucking notes, but like also, Jason, realize that our brains can only handle 7 numbers, and you're throwing out all these terms.
I'll make it real simple. If the same way that you love your favorite band, and you'll buy any record that your favorite band puts out, and you'll buy a t-shirt, and you'll buy a ticket, that relationship is there are only 2 things that matter in the music industry. I say this all the time: the music you make and the relationship with your fans. That's it. Everything else is noise. You may have 15 different managers in your life. You may have 14 different booking agents. You may be on 3 different labels. You may never have a label. You may have different members in your band. The only thing that truly matters is the quality of the music that you make and the relationship with the fan, the buyer. And now that the internet has given us the ability to have that direct relationship, you can build a customer base. What's happening right now, everybody being kicked out of tours and tours breaking down and all that kind of stuff happening. All the artists who have deals with traditional merch companies, those merch companies have built their business on selling to fans at shows, or they have a web store just to sell off, excess merchandise or whatever, or they have 300 bands. They're not developing any direct to consumer plans to be able to sustain you at all. My artists, people like you guys, I mean, obviously you're still growing, so we have a little bit less opportunity to really monetize that. But with someone like Steel Panther or Gwar or Static X, who are my other clients, we are making a buttload of money selling directly to the fan because we've built that relationship. They trust the band. They trust the store.
This is amazing, by the way.
Well, hear me out. So this is the thing about 2020. Because Starset can't tour, Siobhán has time. And because people care about her and they're emotionally invested, because Dustin is such a great direct-to-consumer marketer.
Absolutely.
We believe by de facto, ipso facto, if you will, that people will watch us just because they care about Starset. Not even because they care about Lost Symphony. Not
Some
because
people
they care
will.
about me. They might. Some will. Some will. Granted, absolutely. There will always be some people that do. But because Siobhán has time and she's not touring, we 2020'd her into doing this. And because people care, which is that X factor, because people care about a Static X. That's the X in Static X is the X factor that people care about them. That's why Wayne Static will be forever a legend with the hair and the Slim Jim thing. Like, he's fucking awesome. I loved Wayne Static. I remember the first time I saw him. In fact, I still have a Marshall VS100 amp that recorded Wisconsin Death Trip that I bought off of him at the Worcester Palladium in Worcester. When he told me what happens after you die. I have it on record on my cassette tape. I was actually listening to my cassettes the other day. I put in one of the cassettes, and it's actually me asking Wayne Static that question. That being said, I think
we should talk.
We should. I should put it on. I should have it converted. But that said,
I might need that.
Siobhán should sell us to some people to listen because they care about what's going on with Dustin. Right?
Well, that's part of having that relationship,
Plan? Well, that's relationships. Yep. Chad Gray kept this dude employed Paul Geary has kept him employed. So now I think she's my Chad Gray.
Except
much
look
prettier
at that
and in a bigger band.
Definitely prettier. I love you, Chad Gray, but definitely prettier than Chad Gray. I feel like I would look at it a little bit from a different perspective. I would say that what I'm seeing you do is you're taking advantage of the opportunities that are presented by 2020, and you're saying, okay, I don't have the ability to go sell tour tickets and tour and do things like that I could. Now I'm going to do this. But if you don't own your IP, if you don't own the ability to monetize every aspect of what you do, you're not able to do that. So, and I'm not trying to be
brought to you by
help
Lost
people out
Symphony.
here.
Go on in chapter 1, chapter 2 on lostsymphony.com. You can buy all the things that Jason has told us
And
will
merch.
sell.
And
The
merch.
merch is all
Exactly.
designed by Jason and his team.
Because if what happens if Bravado is your merch company and they have Slipknot and they have, Metallica and whoever else, they're focusing on marketing campaigns to move those things. And if you're a smaller band, they're not doing anything to help you. You haven't built a relationship through your own site to be able to sell things to them.
Who does
Steel Panther
Starset have?
Starset, I know, does something internally. They do have ownership of some internal
Yeah, because I know what?
merch.
He's probably
Beautiful.
like Maynard James
Beautiful.
Keenan. He's like, you know what? Instead of buying the wine, I'm just going to have my own vineyard.
Yeah, no,
He's
that's
like,
something
I'll
that
have my
Dustin is great at.
It's not
He's
FUBU, it's
absolutely
like-
great at that. They will develop, even with transportation. We own the buses, and there is Starliner transportation.
Dude, I
so
love
when the
this
buses
guy.
aren't
He's
being
like-
used,
He's like
very
the Damon
smart.
John of space.
Well, he was not to blow him up, but he was in the industry prior to the band, right? He was like a songwriter or something.
So he was in another band prior that was called Downplay, and he did. I guess I can't speak too much on what songwriting credits he had on other songs, but he was active. Even the Starset was down the road. He had other projects before.
Yeah,
so he did have a lot of experience.
Yeah, so he learned. He was a smart guy. I mean, he is a smart guy. Sorry, not was, is.
Yeah.
But yeah, absolutely. I mean, but that's the way to do it, because I have friends who are in bands and who are managers who manage other bands that are completely, their hands are tied. They can't sell anything to their fans because they don't own the rights to sell anything to their fans, number one. And number two, they haven't developed that relationship.
Well, it's funny you're saying that, because we're talking about space. So the Space Ace, I always talk about this. Like, he was selling bootleg shirts out of his own hotel room when he was on tour with Kiss because they cut him out. And he would always con fans. One of my buddy's friends was a fan of his, and he met the Space Ace, and he was like, hey, yeah, you want to hang out? I was like, you want to hang out with me? And then he came back to his room, and he was printing his own Kiss Psycho Circus tour shirts. And he said, hey, man, just give me 70% of what you make. And that tells you all about the industry in a Kiss metaphor, because we all brought it back to Kiss. You know what I mean? I don't care about Kiss either. But it is all about Kiss. And Starset is if Kiss was actually the greatest band in the land.
Whoa. Whoa.
I know, so many people angry. Dude, all of Detroit, which is where she's from, is going to be so angry. What do you mean your friend was saying Starset's better than her? The people who brought rock and roll to Detroit. The Rock City.
We have covered a lot of topics today.
Yes,
we're coming up on the end here. But Jason, this has been enlightening, to say the least.
Wow, yeah, absolutely.
So where can people check out your website and your artists that you're working with, and anything else that's kind of coming up?
Yeah, I mean, Lekberg Enterprises.com is my website. I don't do a lot of marketing for myself, and I kind of don't list myself many places because I am a servant of the artist. And I'm also me. If you hire me, you get me. So I only have a certain amount of bandwidth. And I just turned down some work recently because I'm in a situation that, I would love to make more money, but I don't have more time. And I need to
it's a smart
called high-class
it's a
problems,
difficult but
Jason.
smart decision. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, look, I'm working for Lost Symphony, and I want to give them the maximum amount of attention that I can possibly do. And so it's just, I'm reachable. And it is a lot of attention. That's all right. Everybody that I work with gets a lot of attention. But I'm reachable, and I'm always open to talk to people. And I love, hearing from bands, and I'm happy to help as I can. But I also, I don't run ads for myself. I don't push myself. I don't make sure I'm in liner notes.
What about Nefariant?
So Nefariant is my passion project. Yes, I've played music my whole life, and Nefariant's my new band. We dropped 3 songs and played 2 shows in like the 3 weeks before coronavirus happened. So we
way to launch, Jason. What happened to like that Nostradamus like trajectory that you have going?
Look, I mean, it was a great launch. We basically sold out one of the smaller clubs here in New York, which was great.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
That was like, I was happy to launch that way. And then we played a show in kind of Ashbury Park area, Jersey, just a fun show with some friends. But we decided to kind of go back into a hole. We're actually remixing everything. We're very, very fortunate to be working with Ulrich Wild, who's remixing the stuff, which is good. It kind of, it gave us a minute to reassess and make sure that we were super happy. And I think that I personally wasn't as happy, but we're there now. I'm very happy with where we are. And it's part of the process. To be completely honest, the issue was that I wanted to be a very different band than I think we actually are. And the first team that we were working with, who are very good friends of mine, they're incredible artists, great producer and mix engineer. I gave them some very specific direction about what I wanted. They did their best to achieve that. And when we talked to Ulrich, I gave him the same direction, and he ignored it all and mixed the song the way that he felt like it should be mixed.
But here's the thing. You send your song to Ulrich Wild because he's Ulrich Wild. Because because Sting calls him and goes, "Hey man, I got this thing and I want it to sound good." And his list of artists is just like everyone ever.
It's crazy.
So that's why he's
artistry.
Good, because every time I tell Cory to do something, he goes, "Sure, Ben," and then he sends it back to me and doesn't tell me he did everything completely differently. I'm like, that was awesome. And I think in my own head that I'm a genius, and I tell Scott I'm a genius, who's again our sponsor. And really, all it is Cory just duping me into thinking that I've done everything that I want.
Interpreting musicians is what mix engineers and producers do.
Yeah.
Lying
Totally.
to me.
Guitarists don't mean what they say.
Well, no, because I remember, and I'll tell this one story. I remember walking into the studio, and we were in Longview Farm Studios in front of a Neve console, and my producer, Scott Riebling, who used to play in Letters to Cleo, he was in Weezer for a bit. He's produced everyone from Fall Out Boy. He's a fucking amazing producer. He said, "Hey, man, so what do you ideally want your guitars to sound like?" And I put on Cowboys from Hell. And he was just like, "But why?" And we're sitting in front of a Bogner Ecstasy, a VHT. So like in girl terms, like we got a Chanel over here, we got a Louis Vuitton, and then I'm just like, "Yeah, give me the 9 West. It's fine." You know what I mean? Like, and I told him that's what I wanted, and he literally was like, "Why do you hate tone?" And then he just didn't listen to me at all, and he put me through a matchless and said, "Be a man, make it work." And it sounds great now.
Yes.
Yeah. So Nefariant, I'm going to be much happier because it's being mixed the way it should have been mixed, even though it's not what I wanted. But I just have to accept the fact that I am who I am and my band are who we are.
Wait a minute, but what did we hear? Because you sent us a link, and I want to tell you that first off, I liked it a lot better because for me, I'm a melodic person. And for me, immediately, I listened to this song 3 times. It was the only one you sent me. So unfortunately, with your other band, I got to listen through like 10 songs, but like I moved on to this song and I liked this song so much. I listened to it again multiple times in a row because there's some amazing singing on it. There's some cool, like where there's ultra heaviness, there's like some keyboards that float over the mixed kind of like a Static X or a Typo Negative where like, it's like there's all this evil shit happening, but then all of a sudden, and I listened to it and it made me think. And I want to tell you, like, hats off, man, because wherever you were with the band 8 years ago when I saw those first videos to what you sent me earlier is amazing. And I tip my hat, and I can't wait to hear what Ulrich Wild does because that guy's a fucking genius.
Yeah. Well, the mix I sent you, the one you're talking about, is Ulrich.
Well, that makes sense then because I loved it. I wanted to tell you how great it was. You're going to be like, I actually mixed that, and that's what we're redoing. And then I sound like an asshole.
No, that's actually Ulrich. So
very soon, he's great.
We'll be re-releasing those 3 songs with 3 more, and if this coronavirus ever goes away, we'll play some shows again.
Wow,
Wouldn't that be nice?
Well, hopefully we can catch you at a gig some point.
Yes.
Well, stay tuned to Jason's new band and Lekberg Enterprises, and like, thank you so much for being here and being again
thank you. Amazing.
Free information booth for all of us troglodytes and plebeians and moronic guitar players that don't take their shit off the stage and take way too long. Thank you for letting us know that there are people out there that actually do know how to navigate the matrix.
I appreciate it. I'm learning every day, and I'll learn from you, and together we'll all be better on the other side of Lost Symphony Chapter 2, and maybe another one. I don't know if we're supposed to talk about it yet.
You guys should get the fuck off this podcast and go to lostsymphony.com because you've been 2020, and Jason, he endorses it. Thank you guys so much.
Absolutely.
We'll see you soon.
Woo.
See you.